There are things that hinder the Pyro from becoming a wrecking ball of an offense class, one of those things being range. As you know, Pyro has always been a close to mid-range class, excelling wherever he's nice and up front with their enemy. This has always been the case as they're no sniper when it comes to their weaponry. Flamethrowers have never been a super reliable type of damage output in any first-person shooter, and TF2 is no different. Unlike a lot of weapons, Pyro has to be consistently on an enemy's tail, holding down that mouse button in order to do any damage. Apart from the heavy, every class has the benefit of powerful one-shot attacks like the scattergun and grenade launch from the Scout and Demo Man respectively. Sure, the Pyro now has the Dragon's Fury and could easily switch to a shotgun of some sort to essentially do the same, but we're talking about primaries here. You don't see an engineer running around with a pistol as their main source of damage, and the same should be said about the Pyro. That's not to say that you should never rely on a secondary weapon at all as a Pyro. In fact, Pyro has one of the most diverse secondary weapon pools in the game, with weapons such as the flare gun and its various iterations making up somewhat for the Pyro's lack of range from afar. What I'm trying to say overall is that the flamethrowers are really the main damage output for the Pyro, so how does the Pyro get around their shortcomings in battle to prevent being taken out before they get close enough to an enemy, or do damage to an enemy other than chip damage from afar? Easy, you flank them. But BonOakley, isn't thinking that a Pyramid would use their brain to flank around their enemy too much to ask? Shit, I didn't think that one through. Jokes aside, ambushing the enemy is the best way of a Pyro to deal as much damage as possible. Many of the maps in the game have altering routes for a reason, as these allow an attacking player to get around a group of enemies that are dominating others trying to get through one route again and again. An example of this is after the first point on CP Gorge. Most of the time, players will deviate to the right path as that is the more direct path to the final point. This can often become a choke point when they meet up with the opposing team, so it's safe to say that it can take some time to push through. However, the left path gives the player an option to go down a path that allows them to get behind enemies, blocking off the big shutter, or they can go up the stairs and around to A, be above the enemy, allowing for a surprise attack, or B, being right behind them and taking out key classes to weaken their defences. What about Twofall? Probably one of the simplest flank routes in the game is the sewer system right underneath the main battlements. If the enemy is again defending their base really well, you can sneak through the wall to be right behind them, allowing for an uber charge to demolish the 6 sentries that are most likely there. While Soldier is able to get in and out of sticky situations fairly easily, Scout and Pyro have to use these alternate paths to get around large groups and do as much damage as they can. But since this is a Pyro channel, we'll focus on the Mumbling Abomination here. Being of average speed in the game, Pyro is surprisingly one of the quicker classes, so going around and through these paths shouldn't be too much of an issue for them. Map knowledge is essentially the key to becoming a good flank Pyro. If you don't really know a map all that well, then you're not going to get very far and probably get lost or go along a path that doesn't benefit anyone at all. Obviously not everyone has amazing memory and can remember the over 100 maps in each path and what the best strategy is, but if you've got those couple of maps that you love playing, then it's a good idea to get into the map alone and discover the best way to go as a flanker. Luckily for Pyro, there's a couple of weapons in their arsenal that allow for a more effective attack or an easier way to get to those paths that are just out of reach normally. Firstly, the backburner. This is easily the best primary to use for a solely flanking Pyro. I don't recommend using this if you're planning on attacking from head on, and I mean it. It offers no benefits to that kind of playstyle and can lead to more trouble than other better choices. As I said, the backburner excels when flanking as its main upside is 100% critical hits from behind, which is insanely powerful when enemies have no idea that you're even behind them. The backburner can just tear through any class, even heavies if given enough time. Light classes won't even stand a chance at all since they're feeble 125 health won't allow them any time to react. This works wonders for snipers who like to stay behind their team. I'm not even going to discuss the downside of a more costly air blast since that doesn't apply to the subject at hand. You're not using the backburner for air blasts, you're using it to annihilate unsuspected enemies. The Phlogistinator is a suitable choice too, as those crits allow for the same effect as the backburner, but from any position. The one major downside for this though is the fact that you have to charge the meter up first, whereas the backburner just does it for you as long as you're behind the enemy. If you want to spice things up though, the Flog isn't too bad of a choice. There are also weapons that, like I mentioned before, allow for easier access to certain paths previously unreachable to a Pyro. The first is the most recent addition and probably the most obvious one, the Thermal Thruster. At the cost of an actual secondary weapon, the thruster lets you fly through the air to wherever you're aiming at. That's putting it simply since there's much more to the Thermal Thruster, but it's clear on why you'd choose this for flanking. High perches and one-way ledge drops are now reachable thanks to the Thermal Thruster, and with a flank Pyro relying on their primary weapon 99% of the time, it's hard not to choose this for flanking. There's also another secondary that allows for a similar effect but can also act like an actual weapon, that being the detonator. This can allow for flare jumping and can allow flanking pyros to reach areas shut off to them still. The downside that occurs though is a smaller jump height compared to the thermal thruster, but let's be real, of course a jetpack will outdo a flare gun. There is an upside to using the detonator though. Unlike the thruster, the detonator can actually deal damage if need be, meaning you can attack those enemies who are just out of range for your primary. This should only occur if you somehow mess up attacking someone, or if someone spots you from afar. So really your choice of secondary is up to you. Do you want amazing height and distance, or do you want relatively good height as well as a backup in case something goes wrong? Yeah, you can cause damage when landing on people with a thruster, but who's going to do that when flanking? Finally, there's the melees. To be blunt, none of these allow for any advantage in a lot of situations other than a power jack. The speed boost can let pyros again reach ledges just out of reach when moving normally, though it's not a deal breaker if you don't have it equipped, since the previously mentioned secondaries can make up for this just fine in all honesty. The back scratcher isn't too bad either I suppose, with it dealing 25% more damage than stock and allowing you to gain extra health when picking up health packs. Map knowledge is key for this working efficiently, and the downside doesn't come into play much since you shouldn't be relying on a medic or engineer if you're flanking. The only point you should be is if they've somehow flanked behind the enemy as well, so I think it's safe to say that this is my choice of melee for flanking pyros. Finally, the only other melee I could somewhat recommend is the third degree, which would allow a pyro to take out a medic at the same time as the person they're healing, but in my opinion this is far too risky to be able to work most of the time. If you either attack the patient or the medic, you won't know that something is up as well. In fact, you should be focusing on using your primary considering there's 100% guaranteed goddamn crits. That goes for any melee, but the health boost from back scratcher is still the key reason for why you should really use that over the others. This is the ideal flank pyro loadout. You may not like it, but this is what peak flankage looks like. Is that even a real word? Who cares? That's what the essentials are if you want to be the most effective flank pyro possible. Flank pyro is very rewarding if done correctly and can nab you quite a handful of kills. Not only is it effective, it can easily sway the tide of a game if you take out key players. I wouldn't say it's a good idea to go in and expect to survive. Flanking is hard if the enemy team are covering multiple sides, and engineers building on a point way back from the point that is actually being defended can be a pain in the neck. But really a flank pyro can be devastating if they're not expecting a backburner to be shoved up their arse. Overall, I'd say practicing this kind of playstyle is a good idea due to the fact that you can learn so much more about particular maps overall, which can then be applied to other classes, especially scouts and funnily enough spies, as these quicker and sneakier routes can allow for these classes to assist in the destruction. I personally don't play much flank pyro myself, but it can be a huge surprise when you're suddenly getting burnt from out of nowhere. Let me know what you think of all the flanking playstyles down below and whether you use it at all. And as always, this has been your Pyro enthusiast BonOakley signing off. See you guys in the next one.
What's up? It's your girl Sally telling you to check out more videos, otherwise I'll have to fight you! Just kidding, but please check them out if you want. We appreciate it.